The gunshot that killed Natalie Harrison's father echoed through her mind every single night, though 3 years had passed since that terrible afternoon in St. Louis, when everything she knew turned to ash and blood. She stepped off the stagecoach in Coloma, California, on a blistering July afternoon in 1852, her dark traveling dress clinging to her skin despite the dry heat. The town sprawled before her in a chaotic jumble of wooden buildings and canvas tents, still swollen with gold seekers, though the easy pickings had long since vanished. Natalie gripped her carpetbag tighter, feeling the weight of her mother's silver locket pressing against her chest beneath the high collar of her dress. Her hands trembled slightly, and she forced them still through sheer willpower. A man stumbled past her, reeking of whiskey even in the middle of the day. Natalie stepped back quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The crowded street seemed to press in on her from all sides. Too many people, too much noise. She focused on breathing slowly through her nose, counting to 5 with each inhale just as her aunt had taught her. "Miss, you need help with your trunk." Natalie spun toward the voice, clutching her bag defensively across her chest. A young boy, perhaps 12, stood by the stagecoach pointing at her larger trunk being unloaded by the driver. "I can manage," she said, though she had no idea how she would carry the heavy trunk to wherever she was supposed to go. "Sullivan's boarding house is just down the street," the boy offered, clearly hoping for a coin. "That where you are headed?" Natalie nodded stiffly. She fished a penny from her reticule and handed it to him, then immediately regretted the gesture when he grinned widely and grabbed her trunk with surprising strength. Now she would have to follow this stranger through unfamiliar streets. Her throat tightened. The boarding house turned out to be a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Mrs. Sullivan herself answered the door, a thick-waisted woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes swept over Natalie with the practiced assessment of someone used to judging character quickly. "You the new school teacher?" "Yes, madam. Natalie Harrison." Mrs. Sullivan's expression softened marginally. "Well, come in then. You look about ready to collapse from the heat." "Rooms upstairs, second on the right. Supper's at 6 sharp. You are late, you do not eat. Rent's due on the 1st of each month." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the dusty street. Natalie closed the door behind her and leaned against it, finally allowing herself to shake. She had made it. 3,000 miles from everything familiar, from the well-meaning relatives who whispered about her condition, from the doctors who prescribed useless tonics, from the pitying looks that followed her everywhere. A fresh start, her Aunt Caroline had called it. A chance to become someone new. But Natalie knew the truth. She had not come to California to become someone new. She had come because the fear that lived inside her chest had grown so large in St. Louis that she could barely leave her room anymore. At least here, no one knew her as the girl who jumped at shadows, who could not attend social gatherings without feeling faint, who woke screaming from nightmares about her father's final moments. She unpacked her few belongings with mechanical precision, hanging her 2 other dresses in the small wardrobe, arranging her books on the windowsill, placing her father's watch on the bedside table. The routine movements calmed her slightly. When she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the pale, hollow-eyed woman staring back. At 22, she should have been married by now, settled with a home of her own. Instead, she was 1,000 miles from anywhere, about to teach children in a rough mining town, utterly alone. That first night, Natalie lay awake listening to the sounds of Coloma. Loud voices drifted up from the saloon down the street. Someone played a fiddle badly. Dogs barked. A woman laughed, high and sharp. Each sound made Natalie's muscles tense, her mind conjuring threats from harmless noises. The next morning, she met with Reverend Thompson, who oversaw the small schoolhouse at the edge of town. He was a thin man with kind eyes and a nervous habit of tugging at his collar. "We have about 20 students on a good day," he explained as they walked toward the single-room building that served as Coloma's school. "Ages 5 to 14, all levels. Some can barely write their names. Others are quite advanced. The previous teacher left rather suddenly to get married." The schoolhouse was stifling in the morning heat, dust motes dancing in the sunlight streaming through the 4 small windows. Rough benches served as desks, and a battered slate board hung on the front wall. It was nothing like the well-appointed schools Natalie had attended in St. Louis, but something about its humble simplicity appealed to her. "You will do fine, Miss Harrison," Reverend Thompson said, mistaking her silence for concern. "The children can be rambunctious, but they are good at heart. Most of them, anyway. The Brennan boys can be a handful, and little Sarah Winters is shy as a mouse, but overall a good group." Natalie nodded, not trusting her voice. She could do this. Teaching was something she understood, something she had trained for. It was a role she could hide behind. School began the following Monday. Natalie arrived an hour early, her stomach churning with anxiety. She arranged the few books they had, wrote the day's lessons on the board, and stood by the door smoothing her skirts over and over until she forced herself to stop. The children arrived in clusters, eyeing her with open curiosity. Some were clean and well-dressed, children of successful merchants. Others wore patched clothes and had dirt under their fingernails, sons and daughters of miners still chasing the dream of gold. Natalie greeted each one, memorizing names and faces, trying to project a confidence she did not feel. "You sound funny," one boy announced. "Like you are from back east." "I am from Missouri," Natalie said, keeping her voice steady. "And yes, people speak differently there than here." "My pa says Missouri folk are all talk and no grit," the same boy challenged. An older girl elbowed him sharply. "Hush up, Tommy. Do not be rude." Natalie let the comment pass, though it stung. She had enough battles to fight inside her own head without adding schoolyard politics to the mix. She began the day with reading lessons, and to her relief, most of the children settled down to work. Teaching, she discovered, left little room for her own fears. She was too busy managing 20 different personalities and skill levels to worry about the tightness in her chest or the tremor in her hands. The first week passed in a blur of exhaustion. Each evening, Natalie returned to her room and collapsed on the bed, too tired even to eat the supper misses. Sullivan had prepared, but exhaustion was better than the alternative. When she was this tired, the nightmares came less frequently. It was on a Saturday morning, exactly 2 weeks after her arrival, that Natalie first saw Wade Xavier. She had forced herself to leave the boarding house to purchase some supplies. The general store was crowded, and she had to wait behind several other customers. Her hands were beginning to sweat, her breathing growing shallow. Too many people in too small a space. The walls seemed to be closing in. "Madam, you all right?" Natalie looked up to find a tall man watching her with concern. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and clear gray eyes beneath the brim of a worn hat. He wore simple clothes, a work shirt and denim trousers, but there was something steady and solid about his presence. "I am fine," Natalie said automatically, though her voice came out thin and strained. The man studied her for a moment, then gently took her elbow and guided her toward the door. Normally, Natalie would have jerked away from an unfamiliar touch, but something about his calm demeanor kept her from panicking. He led her outside into the fresh air and she gulped it in gratefully. "Easy now," he said quietly. "Just breathe. You are all right." They stood there for several minutes while Natalie's racing heart gradually slowed. Other people walked past, but the man paid them no attention, simply standing beside her like a silent guardian. "Thank you," Natalie finally managed. "I do not know what came over me. The heat, perhaps." "Could be." His tone suggested he knew it was more than the heat, but he did not press. "You are the new schoolteacher, right, Miss Harrison?" "Yes, and you are, Wade Xavier. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Small operation, just me and a couple of hands. My younger sister Emma is one of your students." Natalie searched her memory. Emma Xavier, a quiet girl of about 10 with blonde braids and a sweet smile. She always completed her work carefully and never caused trouble. "Emma is a lovely child," Natalie said. "Very bright." Wade's stern expression softened slightly. "She takes after our mother that way. Our folks passed 4 years back, fever. Emma is all I have left." There was something in the way he said it, a fierce protectiveness, that resonated with Natalie. She understood that bone-deep need to hold on to what little family remained. "I should let you get back to your shopping," Wade said. "But if you need anything, if teaching gets too hard or folks give you trouble, my ranch is due north on the main road. The XW Ranch, you will see the sign." "Thank you, Mr. Xavier. Wade is fine." He tipped his hat and walked away with an easy, confident stride that suggested a man comfortable in his own skin. Natalie returned to the store once the crowd had thinned, completed her purchases, and walked back to the boarding house in a daze. Something about the encounter had shaken her, though not in the usual way. Wade Xavier had seen her at her most vulnerable, on the edge of panic, and he had not treated her like she was broken or fragile. He had simply helped and then stepped back, giving her space to recover her dignity. Over the next few weeks, Natalie settled into a routine. Wake at dawn, wash and dress, eat a quick breakfast, walk to the schoolhouse. Teach from 8 until 3. Return to her room. Prepare lessons for the next day, sleep. Repeat. It was a narrow existence, but it felt manageable. She spoke to almost no one besides her students and Mrs. Sullivan. She attended church on Sundays because it was expected, sitting in the back row and leaving immediately after the service ended. She avoided social gatherings, turned down invitations to dances and picnics, and earned a reputation as aloof and unfriendly. She told herself she did not care what people thought. It was easier to be alone than to explain the panic that seized her in crowds, the nightmares that woke her gasping, the constant vigilance that exhausted her even as it kept her safe. But then, Wade Xavier began appearing in her life with increasing frequency. He would ride into town on Saturdays to collect Emma from school and handle business. Sometimes, Natalie would see him outside the general store or talking with other ranchers near the livery stable. He always nodded respectfully when he saw her, but never approached unless she seemed troubled. The first time he intervened again was at church. Natalie had made the mistake of arriving late, and the only available seat was in the middle of a crowded pew. She forced herself to sit, but halfway through Reverend Thompson's sermon, the walls started closing in. She could not breathe. She needed to leave, but she was trapped between bodies on both sides. Panic clawed at her throat. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Just as she thought she might actually faint, a hand touched her shoulder lightly. "Miss Harrison, could I speak with you about Emma's schoolwork?" Wade's voice was quiet but firm. The woman next to Natalie shifted slightly, and Wade held out his hand. Operating on pure instinct, Natalie took it and let him guide her out of the pew and out the back door of the church. Once outside, she bent over, hands on her knees, dragging air into her lungs. "I am sorry," she gasped. I do not know why this happens. I am not weak. I am not. Never said you were. Wade leaned against the church wall, giving her space. My mother used to get spells like that. After my father died, she could not stand being in tight spaces, made her feel like she was suffocating. Natalie looked up sharply. What did she do? Avoided them when she could, pushed through when she could not. Mostly she just accepted it was part of her, nothing to be ashamed of. He paused. She used to say fear is just a feeling, not a fact. It feels real, but it cannot actually hurt you. It feels like it is killing me, Natalie whispered. But it is not. You are still here, still breathing, still fighting. They stood in silence for several minutes. Church let out and people streamed past, some casting curious glances their way. Wade ignored them all, a calm presence beside her. How did your mother die? Natalie asked quietly. You said fever, but was there more? Wade's jaw tightened. Cholera swept through when Emma was 6. Took Ma in 3 days. Pa followed a week later. Emma nearly died too, but she pulled through. He looked at Natalie directly. Whatever you are running from, Miss Harrison, it is eating you alive from the inside. I can see it plain as day. I am not running from anything. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. All right. Wade pushed off from the wall. Emma has been asking if she could invite you to Sunday dinner sometime. She does not have much female influence in her life, and she admires you something fierce. Would you consider it? The invitation caught Natalie off guard. Her instinct was to refuse, to maintain the walls she had built. But something about Wade's steady gaze made her reconsider. Maybe it was the way he treated her, like a normal person rather than a fragile curiosity. Maybe it was the loneliness that had been gnawing at her bones despite her best efforts to ignore it. All right, she heard herself say. Yes, that would be nice. Wade's face broke into a genuine smile, transforming his serious features. Good, how about next Sunday? I will pick you up at the boarding house after church, around noon. Natalie spent the entire week regretting her decision. She considered sending word that she was ill, making excuses. But Emma's eager face in class every day stopped her. The girl mentioned the upcoming dinner at least 3 times, clearly thrilled at the prospect. When Sunday arrived, Natalie dressed in her best day dress, a soft blue cotton with white trim. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up carefully, then immediately took it down and started over when her hands shook too much. She was being ridiculous. It was just dinner at a student's home. Nothing to fear. But fear, she had learned, was not reasonable. Wade arrived precisely at noon driving a wagon. Emma sat beside him, bouncing with excitement. Miss Harrison, I am so glad you are coming. I made biscuits all by myself, and Wade got a chicken from the Hendersons, and I picked flowers for the table. Her enthusiasm was infectious. Natalie found herself smiling as Wade helped her into the wagon. His hand was warm and calloused, the grip firm but careful. The ride to the ranch took about 30 minutes. Emma chattered the entire way, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the various families they passed. Wade said little, but Natalie noticed him watching her occasionally, as if checking that she was all right. The XW ranch was modest but well-maintained. A single-story house with a covered porch sat at the center, surrounded by a barn, a chicken coop, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and horses stood in a corral near the barn. Everything spoke of hard work and careful attention. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A hallway led to what Natalie assumed were bedrooms. The furniture was rough-hewn but sturdy, and Emma had indeed picked wildflowers for the table, arranging them in a blue glass jar. It is not fancy, Wade said, hanging his hat by the door, but it is home. It is lovely, Natalie said, and meant it. There was something peaceful about the space, something that made the knot in her chest loosen slightly. Dinner was simple fare: roasted chicken, biscuits, boiled potatoes, and canned beans. But it was the best meal Natalie had eaten since arriving in California. At the boarding house, food was fuel, eaten quickly and without pleasure. Here, with Emma telling stories about a calf that had been born that week and Wade adding dry commentary, it felt like sharing life rather than simply consuming nutrients. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Natalie her room. It was small but cheerful, with drawings pinned to the walls and a rag doll sitting on the neatly made bed. "Wade made her for me," Emma said, picking up the doll. "After Ma died. He is not very good at sewing, so her face is a little crooked, but I love her anyway." Natalie felt a lump form in her throat. She imagined Wade, rough-handed and grieving, trying to create something to comfort his little sister. "What is her name?" "Rose, like the flowers Ma used to grow." Emma hugged the doll tightly. "Do you miss your family, Miss Harrison?" The question was innocent, but it hit Natalie like a physical blow. She sat down carefully on the edge of Emma's bed. "Yes, very much." "Do they live far away?" "My father is dead. My mother too, though she passed when I was very young. I have an aunt in St. Louis, but we are not close." Emma climbed onto the bed beside her. "Then you are like us. Maybe that is why I like you so much. You understand what it is like to lose people." Natalie had to blink back tears. This child, who had lost both parents before her 7th birthday, possessed a wisdom beyond her years. When they returned to the main room, Wade was cleaning up the dishes. Natalie immediately moved to help, despite his protests. "You are a guest," he said, "and you cooked. The least I can do is help clean." They worked in companionable silence, Emma drying the plates they washed. Through the window, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I should get you back to town before dark," Wade said eventually. "Roads can be dangerous after nightfall." The drive back was quieter than the ride out. Emma dozed against Wade's side, exhausted from excitement. Natalie found herself studying Wade's profile in the fading light. He was not conventionally handsome, his features too rough and weathered. But there was something compelling about him, a steadiness that called to something deep inside her. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "I have not felt this at ease in a very long time." Wade glanced at her. "You are welcome at the ranch anytime. Emma would love it, and to be honest, I could use some adult conversation that does not revolve around cattle prices and weather." "Do you not have friends in town?" "Some. But most folks my age are married with families of their own. Between the ranch and raising Emma, I do not have much time for socializing." He paused. "What about you? You have been here almost 2 months, but you keep to yourself." Natalie's defenses rose automatically. "I prefer my own company. Do you, or are you just afraid of what might happen if you let people close?" The observation was too accurate, too piercing. Natalie looked away. "I am sorry," Wade said. "I did not mean to pry. It is just that I recognize the look of someone trying to outrun their past. I have seen it in the mirror often enough." "What are you running from?" Natalie asked, deflecting. Wade was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "Failure, mostly. When our parents died, I was 23 and cocky as hell. Thought I could handle anything. Reality hit hard. There were nights I was not sure we would make it, when Emma was sick or the cattle were dying or the money ran out. I made mistakes, a lot of them. Sometimes I still wake up scared I am going to fail her, that she will end up in an orphanage because I was not good enough to keep her safe." His honesty stole Natalie's breath. She had spent so much time guarding her own secrets that she had forgotten how freeing it could be to speak truth. "I watched my father die," she heard herself say. 3 years ago, we were in our home in St. Louis. Men broke in, robbers looking for money. Papa fought them to protect me. They shot him. I hid in a closet and listened to him bleed to death in our front hall. I did nothing, I just hid. Wade pulled the wagon to a stop. They were still a mile from town, the road empty in the gathering dusk. "You survived," he said firmly. "That is not nothing." I should have helped him. I should have done something. Instead, I cowered like a child. You are not trained to fight armed men. Your father was protecting you. He wanted you to survive. That is what parents do. Wade turned to face her fully. But that is why you get the spells, is it not? Why crowds make you panic? Natalie nodded, tears streaming down her face now. I am broken. The doctors say it is a nervous condition, that I need rest and quiet. But it has been 3 years and I am no better. If anything, I am worse. I came out here hoping the distance would help, that starting over somewhere new would make the fear stop. But it follows me everywhere. Look at me. Wade's voice was gentle but commanding. Natalie met his eyes. You are not broken. You went through something terrible and your body is trying to protect you. That is not weakness. But living inside those walls forever, that is not living at all. I do not know how to stop, Natalie whispered. You start small. You trust someone enough to tell them the truth, which you just did. You accept an invitation to dinner, which you did. You keep showing up, keep trying, keep breathing. And when the fear comes, you remember it is just a feeling. It feels real, but it cannot actually hurt you. Emma stirred and mumbled sleepily. Wade settled her more comfortably against his side before picking up the reins again. They did not speak for the rest of the drive, but something had shifted between them. When Wade helped Natalie down from the wagon outside the boarding house, his hand lingered on hers for a moment. Same time next Sunday, he asked. Yes, Natalie said. I would like that. Over the following weeks, Sunday dinners at the Xavier Ranch became a routine. Natalie found herself looking forward to them all week, counting down the days. Emma was delighted to have her there, and Wade's quiet presence became something Natalie craved. They talked about everything and nothing. Wade told her about his dreams for the ranch, his hopes for Emma's future. Natalie spoke about her love of teaching, about books she had read, about memories of her father before the tragedy. Slowly, carefully, she began to share the weight she had been carrying alone. Wade never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. But he was always there, a steady anchor. One Saturday in late September, Natalie was walking back from the general store when she heard shouting. A crowd had gathered near the saloon. Her instinct was to hurry past, to avoid whatever conflict was unfolding. But then she heard a familiar voice. I said leave her alone. Natalie pushed through the crowd to find Emma facing down 2 older boys, maybe 14 or 15. One of them was holding a ragged kitten by the scruff of its neck, dangling it over a water trough. What is it to you? The boy taunted. It is just a stray. You are hurting it. Put it down, the boy laughed and lowered the kitten toward the water. Emma lunged at him and he shoved her hard. She fell backward into the dirt. Without thinking, Natalie strode forward. That is enough. The boys turned to look at her. Recognition dawned on the face of the one holding the kitten. Tommy Brennan, one of her most difficult students. This is not school, Miss Harrison, he said insolently. You cannot tell us what to do out here. No, but I can tell your father what I witnessed when he comes to collect you Monday morning. I am sure he will be very interested to hear how you spend your free time. Tommy's bravado faltered. His father had a reputation for strict discipline. He dropped the kitten, which immediately ran to Emma. It is just a stupid cat, Tommy muttered, but he and his friend walked away. Natalie helped Emma to her feet. The girl was cradling the kitten, which was soaking wet and shivering but appeared unharmed. Are you all right? Emma nodded, then burst into tears. Natalie gathered her into her arms, kitten and all, and held her while she cried. When the tears subsided, she walked Emma back to the boarding house and sent word to Wade that his sister was there. He arrived within 20 minutes, riding hard. When Emma ran to him and explained what happened, Wade's expression was thunderous. "Did those boys hurt you?" "No, Miss Harrison made them stop. She was so brave, Wade. She just marched right up and told them off." Wade's eyes met Natalie's over Emma's head. The pride and gratitude in his gaze made her chest feel warm. "Can we keep the kitten?" Emma asked. "Please, she does not have anyone and she is so small," Wade sighed. "All right, but she is your responsibility. You feed her, take care of her." Emma threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you. I am going to name her Lucky because she is so lucky Miss Harrison was there." After Emma went to sit on the porch with her new pet, Wade approached Natalie. "Thank you for protecting her." "I did not really think about it," Natalie admitted. "I just acted. That is what bravery is. Acting even when you are scared." He studied her face. "You are stronger than you know." His words stayed with Natalie for days. She had been so focused on her weakness, her fear, that she had not recognized the strength it took to keep going, to get out of bed each morning, to face a classroom of children, to keep breathing when her mind screamed at her to run and hide. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of rain. Natalie's nightmares began to ease, coming only once or twice a week instead of every night. She caught herself smiling more often, laughing at Emma's jokes, engaging in conversations with other townspeople instead of fleeing. Wade noticed the changes. One Sunday, after Emma had gone to bed, he and Natalie sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "You seem different lately," he said. "More settled. I feel different. I think being here, having a purpose, having people who care about me, it is helping." She hesitated. "You have helped, more than you know." Wade turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his gray eyes were silver. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When you first came to town, I thought you were the saddest person I had ever seen. Like something vital had been carved out of you. It hurt to look at you. But then I saw you with the children, saw how you lit up when you were teaching. I wanted to know more about the woman who could hide so much light." Natalie's breath caught. "Wade, I know you are not looking for this. I know you came here to heal, not to get tangled up with some rancher and his kid sister. But I have to be honest with you. I care about you, Natalie. More than I should, probably. You have become part of our lives, part of our family. Emma loves you and I." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I am saying this all wrong." "No," Natalie said softly. "You are saying it exactly right." She reached out and took his hand. It was calloused and strong, a working man's hand. It made her feel safe. "I care about you too," she admitted. "It terrifies me. After Papa died, I promised myself I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. But you got past my defenses somehow. You and Emma both." "Love is always a risk," Wade said. "But so is living. You can spend your whole life behind walls protecting yourself from pain, but you will miss out on everything good too." "Is that what this is?" Natalie whispered. "Love," Wade lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "For me it is. I love you, Natalie Harrison. I love your strength and your fear, your stubbornness and your softness. I love watching you teach, seeing you smile at Emma's stories. I love how you fight against the darkness inside you even when it feels impossible. I love all of you." Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks, but for once they were not tears of pain. "I am so damaged, Wade. You deserve someone whole. You are whole. You are just scarred like me. We all carry our wounds, but maybe two broken people can help each other heal." He cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "I am not asking for promises you are not ready to make. I just needed you to know how I feel. Whatever you can give me, I will take. A Sunday dinner, a conversation, a walk, Anything. Natalie leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, the kiss of someone rediscovering what it meant to be vulnerable. Wade responded with exquisite gentleness, treating her like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, Natalie was breathless. Not from panic, but from possibility. "I want to try," she said. "I want to be brave enough to try." Wade smiled, and it was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "That is all I need." Their courtship was unconventional by any standard. Wade could not come to town often during the week, busy with ranch work. But he would ride in on Saturday evenings, and they would walk together along the edge of town, talking as the sun set. On Sundays, Natalie would spend the entire day at the ranch, helping Emma with lessons, cooking meals with Wade, simply being present. The townspeople began to notice, of course. Mrs. Sullivan made pointed comments about propriety. Some of the women at church whispered behind their hands, but Natalie found she did not care as much as she would have expected. Let them talk. For the first time in 3 years, she felt alive. The real test came in November when the town held its annual harvest dance. Wade asked Natalie to attend with him, and her immediate reaction was panic. A crowded building, loud music, everyone watching. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but then she remembered what Wade had said. "Fear is just a feeling. It feels real, but it cannot actually hurt you." "Yes," she said, "I will go with you." The week leading up to the dance, Natalie nearly backed out a dozen times. The night of the event, she changed clothes 3 times, her hands shaking so badly she could barely button her dress. Wade arrived to collect her looking handsome in a clean shirt and vest, and the smile he gave her steadied her nerves. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Emma was bouncing with excitement. She wore a new dress that Natalie had helped her sew, yellow calico with white ribbons. The dance was held in the largest building in town, a hall that usually served as a meeting place. By the time they arrived, it was already crowded with people. Natalie felt her chest tighten immediately. Wade seemed to sense her distress because he took her hand firmly. "We will stay near the door," he murmured. "Anytime you want to leave, you just say the word." They found a spot along the wall where Natalie could keep her back to something solid. The music started, a lively fiddle tune. Couples flooded the dance floor. Emma ran off to join a group of other children. Wade turned to Natalie. "Would you like to dance?" "I do not think I can. Too many people." "All right, we will just watch then." But as the evening progressed, Natalie found herself relaxing despite her fears. Wade kept up a steady stream of quiet commentary, pointing out various townspeople and telling her stories about them. He made her laugh with his dry observations. When someone brought them cups of punch, she was surprised to realize she was actually enjoying herself. After about an hour, during a slower song, Wade asked again, "Dance with me. Just one song." Natalie looked at the couples swaying together on the dance floor. The crowd had thinned slightly as people stepped outside for fresh air. Wade's gray eyes held such hope, such patient encouragement. "One song," she agreed. He led her onto the floor and pulled her into his arms. His hand was warm on her waist, his other hand clasping hers firmly. They began to move, and Natalie focused entirely on him. His steady heartbeat beneath her palm, the solid strength of his shoulder under her hand. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. The fear was still there, humming beneath her skin. But it was manageable, held at bay by Wade's presence. "You are doing fine," he said softly. "Just fine." When the song ended, Natalie was amazed to realize she had danced through the entire thing without panicking. A small victory, perhaps, but it felt monumental. They stayed for another hour before Emma started yawning. On the ride home, Emma fell asleep between them again, and Wade and Natalie talked quietly about everything and nothing. "I am proud of you," Wade said. "I know how hard that was. It was easier with you there. That is how it works. You do not have to fight every battle alone, not anymore." When they reached the boarding house, Wade walked Natalie to the door. Mrs. Sullivan's curtains twitched, but Natalie ignored them. "Thank you for tonight," she said. Wade reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for being brave enough to come. I know I keep saying this, but you are stronger than you think you are." "I am beginning to believe it." He kissed her good night, and Natalie floated up to her room feeling lighter than air. Winter came to Coloma, bringing cold rains that turned the streets to mud. The schoolhouse was drafty and cold despite the small stove in the corner. Natalie spent evenings huddled in her room grading papers with numb fingers, wrapped in every blanket she owned. Wade worried about her living in town, away from the warmth of a proper home. He began making excuses to visit more often during the week, bringing firewood or hot meals that Emma had helped prepare. Mrs. Sullivan seemed amused by the attention Natalie was receiving, though she maintained her stern demeanor. By Christmas, Natalie and Wade had been courting for 3 months. Emma began dropping not-so-subtle hints about wanting Natalie to become part of their family officially. Wade would flush and tell his sister to mind her manners, but Natalie could see the hope in his eyes. The idea of marriage both thrilled and terrified her. She loved Wade, loved Emma. She loved the life they were building together. But the thought of making it permanent, of binding her broken self to Wade's future, felt presumptuous. What if her fears never fully healed? What if she had a spell during their wedding, or worse, in front of Emma? What if she could not be the wife and mother they deserved? Wade seemed to sense her internal struggle. On Christmas Eve, he invited her to the ranch for a special dinner. Emma had decorated the small house with pine boughs and paper chains. A scraggly tree stood in the corner, adorned with strings of popcorn and a few precious ornaments that had belonged to their mother. After dinner and gifts, Emma went to bed, leaving Wade and Natalie alone by the fire. "I have something for you," Wade said. He pulled a small package from his pocket. Natalie unwrapped it carefully to find a carved wooden box, smooth and beautiful. Inside, nestled on a bed of fabric, was a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's," Wade said quietly. "After she died, I sold most of her jewelry to keep the ranch going. But I kept this." Emma helped me polish it up. Natalie's hands trembled as she lifted the ring. It caught the firelight, glowing softly. "I know you are still healing," Wade continued. "I know marriage is a big step, maybe too big right now, but I wanted you to have this as a promise. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here. No pressure, no expectations. Just know that I love you, and I would be honored to spend the rest of my life helping you feel safe." Natalie looked from the ring to Wade's face. This man who had seen her at her worst and stayed. Who had never tried to fix her or change her, only support her. Who had given her space to heal while making it clear she did not have to heal alone. "Put it on," she whispered. Wade blinked. "What? Put the ring on my finger. Ask me properly." A slow smile spread across Wade's face. He slid off the chair and knelt in front of her, taking her hand. "Natalie Harrison, will you marry me?" "Yes," Natalie said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the love and hope he had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, Natalie was laughing and crying at the same time. "I am still broken," she warned. "I still have nightmares. I still panic sometimes. This is not a fairy tale cure." "I do not want a fairy tale. I want you, all of you, fears included." Wade cupped her face in his hands. We will build a life where you feel safe, a place where fear has no power. It might not be perfect, but it will be ours." They decided on a spring wedding, giving themselves time to prepare. Natalie moved through the winter months in a daze of happiness. Her nightmares continued, but they were less frequent, less intense. The panic attacks still happened occasionally, but she was learning to recognize the signs earlier, to use the breathing techniques that helped her calm down. Wade was endlessly patient. When she woke screaming from a nightmare about her father's death, he would hold her and remind her she was safe. When crowds overwhelmed her, he would guide her to quieter spaces. When she felt the old fears rising, threatening to drown her, he was there to throw her a rope. But he also challenged her to push her boundaries, to try new things, to remember that she was more than her trauma. Emma was ecstatic about the engagement. She helped Natalie plan every detail of the wedding, from the flowers to the menu. She asked Natalie if she could call her mama after the wedding, and Natalie had to excuse herself to cry happy tears in the other room. Reverend Thompson agreed to perform the ceremony. It would be simple, just close friends and a few townspeople in the little church. Natalie had no family to invite, but Wade's friends from neighboring ranches would be there, and the thought no longer filled her with dread. The week before the wedding, Natalie received an unexpected letter. Her aunt in St. Louis had somehow learned of her engagement and was writing to offer belated congratulations. But more importantly, she included a packet of letters that Natalie's father had written before his death, letters that had somehow been overlooked in the chaos following the murder. Natalie carried them to the ranch, her hands shaking too hard to open them alone. Wade sat beside her as she unfolded the first letter. Her father's handwriting made her chest ache. He had written about ordinary things, his day at work, thoughts about a book he was reading, pride in Natalie's teaching ambitions. But the final letter, written just days before his death, held something more. "My dearest Natalie," it read, "I have been thinking about what I want for your future. More than wealth or status, I want you to find joy. Real, deep joy that comes from living fully and loving fearlessly. Life will bring pain. That is unavoidable, but do not let pain rob you of everything else. Do not let fear rule you. Be brave, my girl, be brave and live." Natalie read the words through her tears. Her father's final gift to her was permission to move forward, to choose life over fear. "He would have liked you," she told Wade. "He would have trusted you to take care of me." "I will spend every day earning that trust," Wade promised. The wedding took place on a bright April morning in 1853. The church was filled with wildflowers that Emma had gathered with her friends. Natalie wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Sullivan had helped her sew. Her father's watch was pinned to her bodice, close to her heart. As she walked down the aisle toward Wade, Natalie felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her chest. So many people watching, so many things that could go wrong. But then her eyes met Wade's, and the fear quieted. He was smiling at her with such love, such absolute certainty, that she could not help but smile back. Reverend Thompson kept the ceremony short and sweet. When Wade slipped a second ring onto Natalie's finger to join his mother's, his hand was steady. When Natalie repeated her vows, her voice did not shake. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Wade, you may kiss your bride." Wade pulled Natalie close and kissed her tenderly while the church erupted in applause. Emma was crying happy tears in the front row, and even Mrs. Sullivan was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The reception was held at the ranch. Neighbors had pitched in to create a feast. Tables were set up outside under the spring sunshine. Someone brought a fiddle and played cheerful tunes. Children ran around playing tag while adults shared food and stories. Natalie moved through it all in wonder. A year ago, She had been a scared, broken woman unable to leave her room without panic. Now she was surrounded by community, by love, by hope. The fear was still there, would probably always be there in some form, but it no longer defined her. As evening fell, Wade pulled her aside. "Happy, incredibly. You, more than I ever thought possible." He kissed her forehead. "Ready to start our life together, so ready." They spent their wedding night in the house that was now officially Natalie's home. Emma had moved into the smaller bedroom, giving the newlyweds the larger one. Natalie stood in the doorway, looking at the space that Wade had worked so hard to make welcoming. Fresh curtains on the windows, a quilt on the bed that had belonged to his mother, wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. "Welcome home," Wade said softly. "Home." The word settled into Natalie's bones, warm and right. That first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Natalie continued teaching, though she struggled with guilt about leaving Emma and Wade each day. Wade assured her that her work was important, that the children of Coloma needed her. Emma thrived with Natalie's presence in her life, blossoming from a quiet girl into a confident young woman. Natalie's nightmares continued to fade, though they never disappeared entirely. There were still hard days when the panic would rise up and threaten to overwhelm her. But she learned to recognize the patterns, to ask for help when she needed it, to be gentle with herself on the difficult days. Wade was true to his word. He created a space where fear had no power, not through magic or miracles, but through steady, constant love. He never dismissed her struggles or told her to simply get over it. He honored her pain while refusing to let it be the only story. 2 years after their wedding, Natalie discovered she was pregnant. The news brought a complicated mix of emotions. Joy at the thought of bringing Wade's child into the world. Fear that she would be a terrible mother, that her anxiety would damage their baby. Worry about complications during childbirth, about all the things that could go wrong. Wade held her as she cried through all the fears, then gently reminded her of how far she had come. "You survived things that would have broken most people," he said. "You rebuilt yourself piece by piece. You are one of the strongest people I know. You will be an amazing mother." Emma, now 13, was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt. She read every book she could find on babies and pregnancy, appointing herself Natalie's personal assistant and protector. The pregnancy was difficult. Natalie was often sick, exhausted, and emotional. The physical changes in her body sometimes triggered panic attacks, but she pushed through, focusing on the life growing inside her. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1855. The labor was long and frightening, but when Wade placed the squalling infant in Natalie's arms, every moment of fear was worth it. "He is perfect," Wade said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You did so good, Natalie, so good." They named him Thomas after Natalie's father. He had Wade's gray eyes and a surprising amount of dark hair. Emma proclaimed him the most beautiful baby ever born, though Natalie suspected she was biased. Motherhood brought new fears and challenges. Natalie worried constantly about Thomas's health, about whether she was doing everything right. But Wade was there every step of the way, splitting the nighttime feedings and diaper changes, soothing both his son and his wife when the anxiety became too much. Slowly, Natalie learned to trust herself as a mother. She learned to distinguish between rational concerns and anxiety-driven fears. Thomas thrived, growing into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and loved being held. Natalie took a break from teaching for the first year of Thomas's life, staying home at the ranch. She discovered that she loved the rhythm of domestic life, caring for her son and husband, managing the household. But she also missed the classroom, missed shaping young minds. When Thomas turned 1, she approached Wade about returning to teaching, perhaps part-time. "Whatever makes you happy," he said. "Emma is old enough to watch Thomas during the day, and I can adjust my schedule. We will make it work." So Natalie returned to the schoolhouse 3 days a week. The balance between work and family felt right. She was using her gifts, contributing to the community, while still being present for her family. Emma turned 16 and began receiving attention from boys in town. Wade was predictably protective, interviewing any young man who dared show interest in his sister. Natalie had to remind him that Emma was growing up, that she needed room to make her own choices. "I know," Wade grumbled. "Doesn't mean I have to like it." But when Emma started courting a young rancher named Daniel from a neighboring property, even Wade had to admit he was a good match. Daniel was hardworking, respectful, and clearly adored Emma. Life settled into a peaceful routine. The ranch prospered under Wade's careful management. Thomas grew from baby to toddler to a bright, curious boy who followed his father around like a shadow. Natalie's nightmares became rare occurrences, ghosts that visited less and less often. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wade took Natalie back to the hill where they had shared their first kiss. They left Thomas with Emma and rode out in the late afternoon, spreading a blanket on the grass to watch the sunset. "You remember what I told you the night I proposed?" Wade asked, pulling Natalie close. "You said we would build a life where I felt safe, a place where fear had no power. Do you feel that, safe?" Natalie considered the question seriously. The truth was more complex than a simple yes or no. She still had moments of panic. She still carried scars from her father's death. But fear no longer controlled her life. It was a part of her story, but not the ending. "I feel loved," she said finally. "I feel seen and accepted and cherished. The fear is still there sometimes, but it is smaller now. You helped me make it smaller by showing me I did not have to face it alone." Wade kissed the top of her head. "You helped me too, you know. When you came into my life, I was just going through the motions, surviving. You reminded me what it meant to truly live." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, they could see the ranch, see the thin line of smoke from the chimney, see Emma playing with Thomas in the yard. "We should give him a sibling," Wade said suddenly. Natalie looked up at him in surprise. "Another baby, why not? We have room. Emma will be getting married soon and moving to Daniel's ranch. The house will feel empty with just the 3 of us." The thought made Natalie smile. Thomas would love a brother or sister. And the first pregnancy, while difficult, had not broken her. She had survived it, grown from it. "All right," she said. "Let us grow our family." Their daughter was born the following spring, a loud, red-faced infant with Wade's stubborn chin and Natalie's dark eyes. They named her Caroline after the aunt who had encouraged Natalie to come to California in the first place. Emma married Daniel that summer in a beautiful ceremony. Natalie cried through the entire thing, watching the little girl who had first welcomed her to the ranch become a woman starting her own family. Thomas adored his baby sister, though he was occasionally jealous of the attention she received. Wade balanced his time between ranch work, his children, and Natalie, somehow managing to make each of them feel special and loved. Years passed in a blur of school lessons and harvest seasons, of skinned knees and childhood illnesses, of quiet evenings on the porch and boisterous family dinners. Emma had 3 children of her own, making Wade and Natalie young grandparents. Thomas grew tall and strong, showing an aptitude for ranching that made Wade's chest swell with pride. Caroline was bright and bookish, reminding everyone of Natalie at that age. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Natalie stood in the kitchen of the ranch house preparing breakfast. Through the window, She could see Wade teaching Thomas how to properly rope a fence post. Caroline was reading in the corner, occasionally laughing at something in her book. This was her life now. Simple, domestic, filled with the kind of ordinary love she had never thought she would have. The girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Coloma 10 years ago, broken and terrified, would not have recognized this woman. That Natalie had been certain her life was over, that happiness was something other people experienced. But Wade had shown her differently. He had not fixed her or cured her. He had simply loved her exactly as she was, fears and all, and created a space where she could heal at her own pace. He had taught her that bravery was not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. That love was not about being perfect, but about being present. The door opened and Wade came in, brushing dust from his hands. He kissed Natalie's cheek as he passed, a casual gesture that still made her heart flutter. "Breakfast smells good. It will be ready in a few minutes. Can you get Caroline washed up?" Wade scooped their daughter into his arms, making her squeal with delight. "Come on, bookworm. Time to eat." Thomas followed them inside, chattering about the rope work he had been practicing. The family gathered around the table, passing plates and sharing stories about their day ahead. Natalie looked around at her family, at the life she had built from the ashes of her trauma. The fear that had once defined her was barely a whisper now, relegated to the background of a full and joyful existence. After breakfast, while Wade and Thomas headed back outside and Caroline returned to her book, Natalie took a moment to step onto the porch. The morning sun was warm on her face. In the distance, she could see Emma's ranch, smoke rising from the chimney. Beyond that, the town of Coloma spread across the valley, forever changed by the gold rush but slowly finding its own identity. This was home. Not just the physical structure of the ranch, though she loved every weathered board. Home was Wade's steady presence, Emma's fierce love, the sound of her children's laughter. Home was the community she had built in Coloma, the students she had taught, the friends she had made. Home was the safety she had found not through running from fear, but by learning to live alongside it. Wade appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about? How far I have come. How grateful I am. You did the hard work. I just walked beside you." Natalie leaned into his embrace. "You did more than walk beside me. You showed me it was possible to trust again, to love again, to live again." "We did it together," Wade said. "That is what marriage is, two people helping each other be brave." They stood together on the porch, watching their children play, and Natalie felt a profound sense of peace. The road had not been easy. There had been setbacks and struggles, days when the fear threatened to swallow her whole. But she had persevered, supported by a man who loved her unconditionally, and a family who had become her reason to keep fighting. The girl who had hidden in a closet while her father died had survived. She had done more than survive. She had healed, had built a life worth living, had become a wife and mother and teacher and friend. The fear would probably always be part of her, a shadow that never quite disappeared. But it no longer had power over her. She had learned that she was stronger than her fears, braver than her trauma, more resilient than she had ever imagined. And she had learned, perhaps most importantly, that she did not have to fight those battles alone. Love, real love, was a partnership. Wade had offered her a space where fear had no power by standing beside her, believing in her, and refusing to let her disappear into the darkness. Thomas ran up to the porch, breathless and excited. "Ma, can we ride out to the creek this afternoon? Pa said he would teach me to fish properly." "That sounds wonderful. Can Caroline come too, if she puts down her book long enough?" Thomas said with the exasperation of an older brother. Natalie laughed and ruffled his hair. "Go tell your sister. Family outing after lunch. As Thomas ran off shouting the news, Natalie turned to Wade. A day at the creek sounds perfect. Every day with you is perfect, Wade said, and though the words were simple, they held the weight of 10 years of love and commitment. They spent that afternoon by the creek, all four of them. Wade taught Thomas the patience required for fishing while Caroline collected interesting rocks along the bank. Natalie sat on a blanket in the shade, watching her family and feeling her heart swell with contentment. This was what her father had wanted for her in his final letter. Joy. Real, deep joy that came from living fully and loving fearlessly. She had found it here in this unexpected place with this unexpected family. As the sun began to set and they packed up to head home, Caroline slipped her small hand into Natalie's. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweet girl." "Are you happy?" The question caught Natalie off guard. Caroline was only 8, but she had a wisdom beyond her years, a perceptiveness that sometimes surprised Natalie. "Yes, baby, I am very happy." "Good. Papa says you used to be sad a long time ago before I was born." "I am glad you are not sad anymore." Natalie blinked back tears. "Me too." That night after the children were asleep, Natalie and Wade sat on the porch as they often did, enjoying the cool evening air. Wade held her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I was thinking," he said. "We should take a trip, maybe to San Francisco, show the kids the ocean. Emma could watch the ranch for a week." The old Natalie would have immediately thought of all the reasons why that was impossible. The crowds, the unfamiliar city, the things that could go wrong. But the new Natalie, the one who had been growing stronger every day for 10 years, felt a spark of excitement. "That sounds amazing. Thomas would love the ships and Caroline could visit the libraries." Wade squeezed her hand. "Look at you planning adventures. I am so proud of you." "I am proud of me too," Natalie said, and meant it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful. This was the life Natalie had built from the ruins of her past. Not perfect, but real. Not without fear, but not ruled by it either. She had brought her hidden fears to this place, to this man, and he had offered her something precious. Not a cure, but acceptance. Not answers, but presence. He had created a space where fear had no power by loving her through the darkness, by believing in her strength when she could not, by standing as a steady beacon when the world felt chaotic and dangerous. And in return, Natalie had given him her trust, her love, her fierce determination to keep healing. Together they had built something neither could have created alone: a family, a home, a future. "What are you smiling about?" Wade asked, noticing the expression on her face. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how loved I feel, how safe." Wade pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You make me feel the same way. Before you came along, I was just surviving, getting through each day. You taught me how to live again, how to hope, how to dream bigger than just making it to next season." "We saved each other," Natalie said softly. "Yeah, I guess we did." The years continued to unfold in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Thomas grew into a young man of 17, taking on more responsibility with the cattle and horses. He had Wade's quiet strength and Natalie's thoughtful nature. Caroline, at 15, had announced her intention to become a teacher like her mother. She helped at the schoolhouse several days a week, and Natalie knew she would be exceptional at it. Emma's children were growing too. Her oldest was nearly the same age as Thomas, and the two cousins were inseparable. The ranch felt alive with family, with the sound of young voices and laughter. Natalie had long since made peace with her past. She had visited her father's grave during a trip back to St. Louis 5 years earlier, finally able to say goodbye properly. She had stood at the headstone and told him about her life, about Wade and the children, about the happiness she had found. She had thanked him for protecting her that terrible day, and she had forgiven herself for hiding. The nightmares were rare now, coming perhaps once or twice a year. When they did surface, Wade would wake with her, hold her until the terror passed, remind her that she was safe. The panic attacks had faded almost entirely. She could stand in crowds without feeling faint. She could attend social gatherings without planning escape routes. She could breathe. On their 15th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Emma and Daniel came with their children. Friends from town made the ride out. Even Reverend Thompson, now elderly but still spry, attended. As Natalie looked around at the gathering, at the life that had grown from a single act of courage getting on that stagecoach to California, she felt overwhelming gratitude. Every person here had played a role in her healing. Emma with her sweet acceptance, the children with their unconditional love, the townspeople who had given her purpose and community, but Wade most of all. Wade, who had seen her broken and had not looked away, who had offered his hand and his heart and his home, who had taught her that love was not about being perfect, but about showing up day after day through the hard times and the good. During the party, Wade pulled her aside for a private moment. They walked to the small garden that Natalie had planted behind the house, away from the noise and celebration. 15 years, he said. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach, looking lost and scared. Other times it feels like you have always been part of my life. I was so broken then, Natalie reflected, so sure I would never be whole again. But you were wrong, you were never broken, just hurt. There is a difference. Natalie turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. You changed my life, Wade Xavier. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, keep healing. You showed me what real love looks like. You changed my life too. Before you, I was just going through the motions, taking care of Emma and the ranch because that is what I had to do. You reminded me that life is meant to be lived, not just survived. You brought color back into a world that had gone gray. They kissed, a soft meeting of lips that still sent sparks through Natalie's body after 15 years. Some things never got old. Should we go back to the party? Wade asked. In a minute. I just want to stand here with you for a moment longer. So they stood in the garden, hands clasped, while the sounds of their family and friends drifted on the evening breeze. This was everything Natalie had never dared to dream she could have. This was home. As the sun set on their 15th anniversary, painting the California sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Natalie reflected on her journey. From that terrified girl hiding in a closet to this confident woman surrounded by love. The path had been long and difficult, but every step had been worth it. She had learned that healing was not linear. There would always be setbacks, hard days, moments when the old fears resurfaced. But she had also learned that she was strong enough to face them. And more importantly, she did not have to face them alone. Wade had offered her a space where fear had no power, and in that space, she had blossomed. She had become a wife, a mother, a teacher, a friend. She had become the woman her father had believed she could be. And she had learned, finally, to believe it herself. The party continued late into the night. Children ran around catching fireflies while adults shared stories and laughter around a bonfire. Natalie sat beside Wade, his arm around her shoulders, watching their family and feeling complete. Thomas approached, a young woman on his arm. Ma, Pa, I want you to meet someone. This is Rachel Henderson. Her family just moved to the area. Natalie smiled at the nervous young woman, remembering how it felt to be new and uncertain. She made a mental note to invite Rachel's family to dinner, to help them feel welcomed in the community. This was the legacy she and Wade were building. Not just a ranch or a family name, but a tradition of kindness, of opening doors, of creating spaces where people could feel safe and valued. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Caroline climbed into Natalie's lap despite being far too old for such gestures. "This was the best party ever," she declared. "When I get married someday, I want a love like yours and Papa's." Natalie hugged her daughter close. "Then choose someone who sees all of you, the strong parts and the scared parts, the light and the shadows, someone who loves all of it, like Papa loves you, exactly like that." After the last guest had left and the children were finally in bed, Natalie and Wade collapsed onto their own bed, exhausted but happy. "Successful party," Wade said, pulling off his boots. "The best." Natalie changed into her nightgown and brushed out her long hair. In the mirror, she studied her reflection. At 37, she had lines around her eyes from years of smiling. A few strands of gray threaded through her dark hair. She looked older but happier, settled in a way she never had been in her youth. Wade came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. Together, they looked at their reflection. "Still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he said. "You are biased. Completely, but also right." Natalie turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the lines on his face. He had aged too, his hair shot through with silver, his face more weathered from years of outdoor work. But his gray eyes still held that same steadiness that had first drawn her to him. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They climbed into bed and Wade pulled Natalie close. This was her favorite time of day, these quiet moments before sleep when it was just the two of them, the world held at bay. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, sensing she was still awake. "About fear, about how it used to control everything I did, and about how you helped me take that power back. You did that yourself. I just held your hand along the way. You did more than that. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You saw strength in me that I did not know existed. You created a space where I could heal at my own pace without judgment or pressure." Natalie propped herself up on one elbow to look at him properly. "You offered me a space where fear had no power, and that changed everything." Wade reached up to cup her cheek. "And you brought life back into my world. Before you, everything was duty and responsibility. You reminded me about joy and hope and possibility. We healed each other." "Yes," Natalie agreed. "We did." She lay back down, settling into Wade's embrace. Outside, an owl hooted softly. The night was peaceful, full of the sounds of home. As Natalie drifted toward sleep, she thought about the girl she had been when she arrived in Coloma, that Natalie would have been amazed at this life. The fears that had seemed insurmountable had been conquered, not through magic or miracles, but through steady love and patient determination. She had learned that bravery was not the absence of fear. It was feeling the fear and choosing to live anyway. It was getting on a stagecoach when everything in her screamed to stay hidden. It was accepting a dinner invitation when crowds made her panic. It was saying yes to a marriage proposal when intimacy terrified her. It was choosing, again and again, to trust and love and hope. And Wade had made those choices possible by being her safe place, her steady ground, her home. The years ahead would bring new challenges, she knew. Thomas would eventually marry and perhaps start his own ranch. Caroline would pursue her teaching dreams. There would be grandchildren to spoil, aging parents to care for, the inevitable losses that came with a long life. But Natalie no longer feared the future the way she once had. She had learned that she was strong enough to face whatever came. And she had learned that she would never have to face it alone. Wade's breathing had evened out into the rhythm of sleep. Natalie kissed his cheek softly, then closed her own eyes. She had come to California broken and afraid, carrying hidden fears that had nearly destroyed her. But she had found healing in the most unexpected place, not in solitude or medicine or running away, but in love. In a man who had offered her acceptance without condition, support without judgment, and a space where fear had no power. Together, they had built a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. A life filled with love and laughter, with family and purpose, with the simple joy of waking up each morning beside someone who knew all your scars and loved you anyway. As Natalie finally drifted into sleep, her last thought was one of deep gratitude. For Wade, for Emma, for her children, for this life she had built from ashes. For the courage she had found to keep trying, keep healing, keep loving. The fears that had once defined her were now just whispers, shadows that occasionally passed through but no longer stayed. In their place was something stronger: love, hope, belonging. She had come to the Wild West looking for escape and had found so much more. She had found home. She had found family. She had found herself. And she had found Wade, the cowboy who had seen past her fears to the woman underneath, who had loved her through the darkness and into the light, who had given her the greatest gift anyone could offer: a space where she could finally, truly be safe. In that safety, she had bloomed. And in that blooming, she had discovered that she was and always had been enough. The end.